19th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Goodyear, and ask that you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let the record show that Commissioner Joanne Osborne and Commissioner Gabriel Bay are not with us this evening. First item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission held on June 21st, 2006. Do I have any additions or corrections to those draft minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve June 21, 2006 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Laux. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion is approved. Mr. Bay is here. Okay, the next item on our agenda is ex parte communications. Is there anyone that has ex parte communications that they would like to disclose on items on this evening's agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. We are going to have a presentation from Arizona Department of Transportation, and Matt Burdick is pinch hitting for Shannon Williamson, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us out tonight. Again, my name is Matt Burdick. I'm from ADOT. Tonight we're going to walk you through some of the projects. We have a lot of projects going on in the Goodyear area, so we're going to walk through and take questions you may have. To give you some background on the regional transportation plan that we're in the midst now of implementing. In 2003, the Maricopa Association of Governments approved a $15.8 billion regional transportation plan. And in 2004, voters approved Proposition 400, which provided funding necessary to implement that regional transportation plan. The regional transportation plan, to give you some background, is a partnership developed both by ADOT, the Maricopa Association of Governments, local cities, including the City of Goodyear, Valley Metro, and Valley Metro Rail, to help manage regional transportation programs, coordinate projects, develop finance strategies to fund those projects, and then foster the communication and public involvement linkages as all of these projects begin to move into the design and construction phases and facilitate collaboration regionally on transportation initiatives. Some of the reasons as far as why was the plan needed: to most effectively pool and prioritize regional resources here in the metropolitan Phoenix area, to get buy-in from all the communities and agencies to help have a balanced transportation program for freeways, streets, and transit programs, and to help meet the mobility needs that we have in the Valley of the Sun related to all the explosive growth that we're experiencing right now. Goodyear obviously is a city that's experienced that firsthand. To give you an idea of some perspective on the growth that we're preparing for, here's a photo illustration. The red dots there are indicating the major population centers here in the Valley of the Sun. In 2000, there were about 3.1 million people in the Valley of the Sun. You can see the overlay of the freeway system with I-10 and with the Loop 101 and Loop 303 on there. As I advance this, 2030 is what we are preparing for from a planning standpoint right now. Just over 6 million people is what we are preparing for. This gives you an idea of what that looks like. Obviously a lot of growth in the West Valley. over the next 25 some years. A lot of growth here in Goodyear and other communities in the Southwest Valley. So with that as kind of a background as to how the Valley of the Sun is projected to grow, obviously transportation is critical to keep our economy going and to keep people moving from point A to point B. This is a map illustrating what is in the Regional Transportation Plan from a freeway standpoint, as well as some of the surface street improvements that are along with that. I'll point out specifically in the Southwest Valley we have a number of new freeways that are coming. South Mountain Freeway is one new freeway. We've been working on studying where that future freeway might go. There's another route south of I-10, at this point referred to in the plan as the I-10 reliever, also referred to as State Route 801. That will go through a future naming and numbering process, but for right now, for the study and planning purposes, that's what we're referring it to as State Route 801. That would be a new east-west freeway route that would run through this very western edge of Phoenix, through Avondale, Goodyear, and then into the Buckeye area. What's planned from a funding standpoint is for that freeway to be in place between the South Mountain Freeway and a future extension of the Loop 303 here in Goodyear. Provides people another option to Interstate 10 to go east and west across the Southwest Valley. 303 obviously is another freeway. We'll work to, over the next 10 plus years north of I-10, to make that into a freeway with 3 lanes in each direction from I-17 down to I-10, and then a further extension of the 303 in the Goodyear area from I-10 down to that future State Route 801. You'll notice in black there, that is indicating a future 303 extension that is planned from a land acquisition standpoint in the next 20 years. Again, the money that's set aside in this plan. Right now, the plan is not indicating that we would have the funding to actually build a freeway on that segment, but to start the process to acquire land for that future freeway. Also in the dotted line between State Route 85 and the 303, you'll see that that's an extension of State Route 801. It's envisioned in the plan right now that we would not have the funding to build a full freeway width with 3 lanes in each direction, but that we would have the ability to build something to provide a continuity out to State Route 85. So a lot of it's obviously depending on funding that comes in to this region. If we have the funding, obviously that would be one of the projects we move forward with. I-10 and State Route 85 are other projects here in the Southwest Valley that have a lot of funding as far as more lanes. I'll get into that in just a few minutes as far as existing freeways. So I-10, State Route 85, and then also the Loop 101 and Grand Avenue. Those are some of the key things in the West Valley as far as expansion of existing routes. The role, obviously, to implement a plan like this, there's a lot of different parties that are involved. The Maricopa Association of Governments, the Regional Council, Goodyear obviously is part of that, consists of the elected officials from 23 communities here in Maricopa County. They conduct the regional transportation planning efforts and develop the regional transportation plan. They establish the priorities for phasing and the funding of projects in that plan. They also improve accelerations and cost changes to the regional transportation plan. I-10 obviously is one of those projects that has gone through that process to accelerate. And they also approve the air quality analysis from a regional standpoint for all of these various transportation projects. ADOT, as a partner in that effort, our role really is to deliver the regional transportation plan. The planning efforts that's taken place, our job is to take that to the next step by implementing the regional transportation plan, and that involves conducting the environmental studies to determine what would be impacted by building some of these future freeways and expanding some of the existing freeways. We buy land for freeway routes and freeway expansions. We design the freeway improvements, and we also build and maintain the freeway system here in the state. We also have the authority to approve enhancements to the regional freeway system. That's something that we've worked closely with local communities on, improving some of the aesthetics treatments and pedestrian and other transportation facilities that would be adjacent to the freeway. So those are some of the things that we do. From a public involvement standpoint, obviously we've talked about the growth in the Phoenix area and the amount of projects that we're going to have. So obviously the public plays a critical role in this. So we have really worked to try and commit additional resources to our public involvement effort, and that includes working very closely with local communities like the City of Goodyear, businesses, elected officials, involving the public early on in the decision-making process and helping them to understand what's involved with implementing these various projects, and then continue that information and public involvement through the design and construction phases to keep people informed of the status of projects and some of the impacts associated with that. More specifically, we're going to walk through some of the specific projects as far as the South Mountain Freeway connection, the future State Route 801, the expansion of Interstate 10, and then the Loop 303 here in Goodyear. South Mountain Freeway, this kind of gives you an idea. In the West Valley, we've been studying multiple alignments and how they would connect with I-10 and some of the issues associated with that. Last month, we announced that our preferred connection point to I-10 would be to stick with the connection that was planned back in the 1980s and connect that with 55th Avenue at I-10 at roughly 55th Avenue. So that's the alignment there in blue. We also looked at the other alignments you see up there that would connect at 71st Avenue or Loop 101. So we have moved forward with that. We're not in a final decision stage, but we've given indication here in the West Valley as to where we think the preferred connection point would be as a result of looking at the engineering and environmental and societal and cultural impacts and economic impacts associated with each of those options. South Mountain Freeway, from a need standpoint, it helps to optimize the regional transportation plan here in the West Valley, specifically when you target the population here in 2030. Results in faster travel times and less freeway and street congestion with that in place versus if it's not in place. Travel time savings across the entire region is estimated to be about $400 million per year if it's in place versus if it's not in place. Some of the things that we study as far as the South Mountain Freeway, and this is true for all of our new freeway segments. This gives you a list of some of the things that we have to look at when people ask, what are some of the things you have to study and why do these studies seem to take so long? Part of it is the complicated nature of these environmental studies, looking at the air quality and some of the environmental issues, the economic impacts, the properties that are displaced, and some of the how it meshes with what's planned on a local basis as far as land use. And then, of course, the actual operation of the freeway and the cost and design and some of the other issues associated with that. So these are all the issues that we look at as part of the study. South Mountain Freeway, initially we started with more than 30 different alternatives. We've worked to refine those as time has gone by. From a public and an agency standpoint, we've had over 2,000 comments, actually over 2,100 comments just since November of 2005. So we've had a lot of public involvement and input from the public. Resolutions from communities have been included in our decision-making process, as well as a recommendation from the Citizens Advisory Team that was formed. And each of these alternatives are studied in detail in all the different technical reports that we have to do to look at all the environmental factors associated with this freeway. From a scheduling standpoint, as far as the next steps, I mentioned last month we announced preferred in the West Valley. Early next year, we'll issue a draft report that will outline all of the issues associated with the South Mountain Freeway. And our goal is to wrap up this study by the end of 2007 with a ultimate decision as to does the region support moving forward with building the South Mountain Freeway, or if not, where do we go from here? And if the decision is to move forward with building the South Mountain Freeway, our target is to start construction in the 2009 time horizon, and our goal is to try and have that freeway completed roughly by the end of 2015. One of the things that when I mentioned if the region decides build versus no build is a requirement that we are required to consider as part of any new freeway, consider what the action would be of not building something. And so that's part of the federal environmental process, is to look at not only building but also not building, what happens. State Route 801, these are some of the corridors. We have multiple different corridors that we're looking at that would travel east-west. The routes you see there in white, those are the South Mountain Freeway, so the furthest to the right would be the 55th Avenue alignment. And so that route would, we're looking at multiple routes that would run roughly in the Broadway to southern area. Some dip further south, closer to the base of the Salt River and Gila Rivers. But those are the corridors. Each of those corridors right now is roughly about 1,000 feet wide. And so what we're working to do is to refine that again, to a preferred route, and then make a decision as to the future alignment of that State Route 801. More specifically, if we look at Goodyear, there's different options as far as how that future State Route 801 would connect with the 303. So these are a couple of the options that we've considered at this point. We've not made a determination as to which one we think is the best. That's something that we're working very closely with the City of Goodyear, and then also as part of that future 303 extension from I-10 south to this future route, looking at how those two different freeways would connect, what would make the best sense. From a timing standpoint, the summer of 2005 is when we initiated work on this freeway, beginning to gather some of the information for the environmental and engineering study. We've completed the initial environmental engineering study from a standpoint of, I guess I should say, we are working to complete the engineering and environmental study. Our target is to have that done by the summer of 2007, so roughly a year from now. Our goal is to complete the initial design in the early stages of 2009. Next steps, as far as the technical development of this study, would be the land acquisition, final design, as far as all the different engineering aspects of building this, and then construction right now, based on the priorities that are established in that regional transportation plan. Funding to actually build this is in 2021 to 2025. Obviously, that's something from a policy standpoint this region will have to address as time goes on, but what we're working to do is to establish where that future route would go, start the land acquisition, and then if there are opportunities to accelerate that, we know where that freeway would go, and we have the land set aside to do that. From a standpoint of why do we need State Route 801, obviously the congestion here in the Southwest Valley is continuing to grow, and as we have more people moving here, it's going to continue to get worse. So additional capacity from a freeway standpoint is necessary to move traffic going east and west in the valley. Moving on to I-10, another east-west freeway, obviously. We're in the midst of working to add additional lanes in the median of I-10, working to complete our engineering studies, which would add one more lane as well as a HOV lane in each direction between the Loop 303 and Loop 101, and then also on the segment between the Loop 303 and State Route 85, adding one more lane in each direction. So one thing of note you'll see there, asterisk, the future 303 connection will require some realignment of existing I-10. So that's one of the things that we're looking at as part of this study, is that realignment of Interstate 10 as part of this. Again, we started that work on this engineering and environmental study last summer, June of 2005 exactly. Completed the engineering and initial environmental study in the spring, and we're working to complete the initial design for that median widening here this summer. And next steps, we're going to work towards finishing the design later this summer with later in 2006, and then also beginning construction here by 2008 in the median of I-10. Associated with this is obviously additional improvements to I-10 as far as the outside widening. And we've approached this as far as doing two different studies. The interior widening, there's less impacts, and we were able to get the environmental study done faster and then move into the design process. The outside impacts, because of some of the ramp configurations that need to be adjusted, it's a little bit more of an involved process. So we're working to add one more lane in each direction between Saraville to Dysart, and then also auxiliary lanes, or you may look at them as merge lanes, between each of the on and off ramps between Estrella Parkway and Litchfield Road. We're just beginning some of the initial data collection. We started that earlier this year in the spring, working to complete the study, the environmental study, by early 2007, and to complete the initial design for this outside, on the widening of I-10 on the outside in the spring of 2007. So the next steps would obviously then be moving into the final design and then ultimately construction. 303, that's obviously the segment from I-10 south to the future State Route 801. What we've got outlined here is this is our study area that we're looking at, as far as we haven't at this stage begun developing specific alignments. Yes, sir.
Could we go back to the I-10 widening?
Mm-hmm.
With the city, the four cities committed to advancing the construction of this, both the median HOV lane and the outside lane, Is 2008 still the target number for beginning of construction, or will that be moved up at all?
That could the acceleration that the cities have worked to do. They've worked to accelerate it from the 2011 timeframe. Basically, as soon as we can finish up the design and move forward with construction, it's possible, yes, that we could maybe move it. Depends on we can maybe move it into the 2007 time horizon.
So that was 2007 was the number I had been hearing.
Yeah, summer. I believe what our target right now is that we're looking potentially for advertising this project. It could be as soon as summer of 2007 to move forward with advertising the project. There's some time, obviously, contractually to bring a contractor on board, but as soon as we finish the design, we know the urgency to add more lanes to I-10. We'll move forward with that as soon as possible. Okay. 303, what you see outlined there is the study area. We have had one initial public meeting to talk with people and let them know that we are beginning the study efforts, solicit input from a standpoint of what are some of the issues that we need to be aware of and consider as part of the study. The next steps that we're working on now will be to go and work with the City of Goodyear and other stakeholders on defining future alignments that should be looked at, future corridors that should be looked at for the 303 extension south of I-10. Our goal is to have at least an initial draft or initial development of those corridors sometime in the fall of this year. Purpose and need from a growth standpoint, obviously, continue to go back to that 2030 graphic that we talked about as far as the population growth and the future traffic demand. The linkage to State Route 801 in the future is critical, as well as the future connection to the south of State Route 801. That's obviously critical from a development standpoint, trying to lock in where that would go. And then with that, I guess I'll open the floor for any questions and discussion.
Mr. Laux.
In light of the discussion about the South Mountain Freeway and the high cost of that, sort of led to a discussion of the increased cost just generally in building freeway lanes. I think it's the point is that it's mostly right-of-way acquisition cost that's driving that. How is that going to affect the identified projects in the regional transportation plan?
Well, one of the things that's done from a cost standpoint, the key factors from a cost standpoint that we've been very closely watching is obviously the land values, as you mentioned, the cost of buying land and relocating folks if there are relocations associated with that. And then secondly would be the cost of construction itself, the cost of construction materials, concrete, steel, and some of the other factors. So some of the things that we've been working on, obviously there's a lot of discussion at this point as far as how land acquisition activity should occur for facilities like this in the future. What we've been working on as far as updating the cost figures, from a positive standpoint, the collections, the monies, the revenues that are coming in are higher than what was projected in the regional transportation plan when that was put together. So we have had the benefit of higher collections, and we're updating our cost estimates and our revenue collections every year. The Maricopa Association of Governments is doing that. So I think to answer your question, it's something that we have to constantly monitor. And what our goal has been with initiating, even though some of these projects from a funding standpoint to be built are, in some cases, 15 years from now, the sooner we can determine where those routes are going to go, we can start buying land for that. For State Route 801, we have money available as soon as next year to start going out and buying land. And the sooner we can go in and buy land, obviously the better it's going to be from a cost standpoint and better it will be for the region. So that's been our focus with these new freeway routes is let's identify where they're going to go, allow the communities to know that and properly develop around that and start to buy the land years in advance of freeway construction activities.
Certainly one of my concerns is that, if revenues don't quite meet, what's in the plan, obviously a lot of what is going to be done out here is in that 15 to,
Right.
In that phase 4.
Right.
And so I would hate to see, those projects not being able to be funded based on, those revenues gone elsewhere.
Well, one of the things and obviously that's a lot of that is the policy discussion that occurs by the elected officials and working with MAG. One of the things that MAG I know has been consistently working on is to make sure that as far as projects and the timing of those projects, that they are committed to protecting the phasing of projects, obviously with the exception of the ability to work with local communities on the acceleration. So it is something that constantly has to be monitored as we move forward, and the ability to accelerate these projects. And obviously we don't know what the future is going to hold as far as funding 15 years from now. If there's additional funding revenue sources that we can tap into, maybe there's some other additional creative financing models that we can tap into to try and move these projects forward. One thing I'll say to the group, we're in the process now of wrapping up Proposition 300 projects that were developed back in the mid-1980s. And one of the things that was done several years ago to try and accelerate the construction of those projects is we worked through various financing programs to move forward some of those projects. We're basically, instead of 2014, we're completing those now in 2008. So those are some of the things that obviously, as time has gone by, we've learned a lot of experiences from the last 20 years on freeway development, and anything that we can do to secure corridors, which is what we're focused on right now, and protect these future investments in transportation. That's what we're committed to.
Yes.
Are you precluded from, by statute, from doing any kind of funding or anticipation work after 2025 because there is no funding mechanism after this last 20-year thing? And if you are, when would you be able to start planning, assuming that a tax of some sort, transportation sales tax, would be extended again for another 20 years? So how would that, how do you, where do you go from, 2020 to 2040?
To answer your question, from a planning standpoint, the designated planning authority here in Maricopa County is the Maricopa Association of Governments, and they are actually already looking at what we need to do beyond 2025. They have started a study earlier this year looking at, specifically in the West Valley, developing a transportation framework from essentially Wickenburg south through Buckeye, and then heading south, here heading towards Gila Bend. So some of those efforts are already starting standpoint, but that would be the responsibility of the Maricopa Association of Governments to work on that, and then figure out from a funding standpoint what we would need to do as a region to fund that. ADOT, what we would focus on is we've developed long-range transportation plans in terms of Interstate 10 and some of the other existing routes, and then we collaborate with MAG on the planning and funding of those routes here in Maricopa County.
Mr. Bay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Very informative. Of course, it raises many questions. Sure. So I have a few, and if you don't mind addressing them, I think this would help me out a lot.
Sure.
On your slide number 8, you talk about MAG has the authority to approve accelerations, cost changes to the regional transportation plan. Recently, there's been, I guess it's a think tank or some sort of gathering of the minds to accelerate the plan collectively. And I think it was a closed session. Do you have any insight into what the outcome of that session was and how that's going to impact the overall acceleration?
Well, the session you're talking about, there was a session that was involved, put together. Maricopa Association of Governments was involved with that. The development community was involved with that. ADOT was involved with that as well. And I think at this point, there's more discussion yet to occur. What you're referencing was the idea of how can we take this 20-year plan and advance it so that some of these projects can be done years sooner. And so those types of discussions are still ongoing. There would be obviously a lot of policy discussion and interaction as to the ability to do that, and then looking at it from a funding standpoint of what additional measures would need to be taken to advance that. But there's a lot of discussion right now in terms of growth and development and providing the ability to invest in these corridors, and also to, from a growth standpoint, making sure we have a collaborative investment not only in new developments and commercial developments, but also in our transportation facilities that will service those new developments.
Okay, so they're still talking.
It's still talking. Yep, they're still talking.
On your slide number 12, you talked about the alternatives and that there was a decision, you've now announced a decision to do the 55th Avenue alignment. But you also noted that there needed to be some final, you're in the final decision stage. Does that mean you do not have a final decision yet? And if so, who has the authority to make the final decision?
Okay. I'll elaborate a little bit more on that. The process that we're following is a federal environmental process. It's the decision as far as the outcome of the study, the final authority on that is the Federal Highway Administration.
Okay.
So the study process, we follow the environmental process that's been established by the National Environmental Policy Act, and the Federal Highway Administration is essentially the owner of that process. So we will finish up the study, and the reason I say it's not a final decision is that we will need to resolve what happens in the eastern section of the study, which is in the Ahwatukee area, as well as on the border with the Gila River Indian community, before we have a final decision. What we are anticipating is that 55th Avenue, based on all the issues that we've looked at over the last several years, is the best option to move forward with. It's not a final decision, so if something that we have not already discovered in the past 5 years isn't unearthed, which we have pretty much unearthed everything that could be unearthed at this point, we are not anticipating that would change, but certainly the public is going to have a say in this as well, from the standpoint of giving us their input on what they think, if they think that's the best route or if they think another route it should be looked at. But we don't anticipate there being a change, but we also have to resolve what happens in the eastern section. And then let me also address it from a standpoint, Federal Highway Administration is the decision maker from a study standpoint, but this region, specifically the Maricopa Association of Governments, the Regional Council, of which Goodyear is one of the members on that council, has the ultimate authority from a funding standpoint. So this region controls where and how funding for freeways, for example, are used here in the Maricopa County area. So it is really a twofold decision. That you have the study process, and we will come to an outcome in collaboration with this region of what we think is the best option to move forward with, and does this region support building the South Mountain Freeway, and then send that information along to the Federal Highway Administration for them to review and make sure that we've done our due diligence through the study process, and then they will issue a record of decision. That record of decision allows us to move forward then with land acquisition, design, and construction.
So typically the Federal Highway Association does not change your alignment when you, okay.
No, they part of this process is Federal Highway Administration. They need to focus. They're involved throughout this entire study. We are constantly working with their staff here in Arizona, and then also occasionally we bring in other resources from the Federal Highway Administration to help us through the study process. So no, the decision of what happens as far as where this will go is really a regional decision, as well as the funding aspect. They will make sure, Federal Highway Administration will make sure that we follow the process appropriately.
Okay, thank you. And then on your slide 16, when you talked about the South Mountain Freeway project schedule, there's an asterisk, and it says assumes no GRIC. Now, I may have missed what that stood for. Could you tell me?
I sure can. The GRIC stands for the Gila River Indian Community. So what this schedule that I've talked about as far as trying to finish the study up at the end of next year, right now the Gila River Indian Community has not granted us the ability to look at options on tribal land. And as a sovereign nation, that is solely their discretion. So what we've indicated is if they were to allow us to look at options, that would add additional time to the study. Depending on when that happens, we could be talking about anywhere from 12 to 24 months, depending on when that happens and what is discovered. But right now, we do not have options that have been granted from the Gila River Indian community. So if we go to the end of the study and that is the ultimate outcome, that there are no options on the Gila River Indian community, then basically the end of next year would be the goal to have the study completed.
And then on slide 18, this was a little more dear to me than the others, obviously.
Sure.
You said that there were 2 routes under consideration through the city of Goodyear. And best of my recollection is that we've been having plans come forward to us where we set aside lands that, for the freeway, that was more along the alignment of the river. And so this red alignment that you have here, I think is sort of new to me.
Okay.
I guess I'm a little concerned about that being there, since we've been working diligently to try to make sure that as we plan for our future, that we take time to set aside lands for the freeway.
Right.
And if you in fact have an alternate alignment that we're not aware of, that may impact our future. And I surely wouldn't want that to happen. So I heard you say, though, that you were working with the cities
Yes.
in order to do that. So is this one just crop up out of nowhere, or?
Well, part of this federal process that we're following requires us to look at alternatives, look at multiple options. And we have been working with the city of Goodyear and do know full well that the city has been working to try and set aside land in that green route.
Okay.
So part of, obviously, we're not at a point in this study to pick a specific route, but we will be nearing that point soon. And so part of this process is to look at, okay, let's compare the green versus the red, and the green has these positives or these negatives, and the red has positives and negatives. So obviously, if the city's been working to establish and set aside certain areas in their community, that's going to weigh a lot higher than perhaps another route.
Yeah, so in my mind, green means go and red means okay.
You can read into that.
And then I had one final question. On slide 25, you were talking about the study areas, and there were 2 boundary lines sort of indicated, at least that I can see. There's a blue one, and then there's this dash line.
Yes.
And I didn't quite understand what that meant. Is the blue area the expanded area in which you're studying, and the dotted line, which, by the way, we don't know where that goes because it kind of gets clipped. Is that some refined area? What?
Yeah, good question. The blue outlined area is the, and I should also point out that north is to the right of the page, so it's not quite the same orientation as what we may be used to. So
I saw the north area.
the blue outline area is the Loop 303. Yeah, you have to shift a little bit. The Loop 303 outline is the study area. The brown dash line, that is the State Route 801 study area. So we talked about the green and the red options. Obviously, we're going to be working to try and refine that. So what that, where the blue and the brown intersect, that's where we're looking at different options for where the future State Route 801 and the future 303, where the freeway-to-freeway connection might occur.
All right.
And I appreciate you pointing that out because I did not mention that earlier.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you.
Ms. Laurentano?
Yes, let me see. It's on slide number 7.
Okay.
As one of these lucky I-10 commuters every morning, sooner's better than later for me. I noticed that in the East Valley there's a lot of interchange and newly improved arterial roads, but I don't see any of those in the West Valley. And I know from driving it, like McDowell and Van Buren and Buckeye Road are often, right now, they're your I-10 relievers. Is there anything else up the pike for the West Valley with regard to improving any of those roads?
Well, part of the plan, and this is where you had a lot of policy type discussion that was going on, as far as balancing funding across the region. So a lot of what you've had as far as the focus when the plan was put together in 2003 was a lot of the East Valley communities wanting to get apply regional funding for arterial streets and intersection improvements, and a lot of the focus in the West Valley was we need an improved freeway network. That's not to say that you wouldn't have other intersection improvements being funded on more of a local basis. But what all those different triangles and some of the purple lines, what those are indicating is that some of those communities have focused their funding that they wanted to have in the plan on using regional funding to help improve some of their local street intersections.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of questions. One is, at what point in the process do the communities have the opportunity to express interest in aesthetic improvements to things like bridges and underpasses, some of the artistic things that you see in Scottsdale and some of the East Valley communities? I think Glendale's done a little bit with the 101. At what point do we have the opportunity to express desires, and is that increment actually a locally funded thing? And just to take a stab at a number, how much per mile did it cost over in Scottsdale with the 101?
Good question. To answer your question, the timing of that, when we'd have a discussion with the local communities on enhancements, visual enhancements or landscaping enhancements, that would typically occur in the final design stage of projects. If it was some other type of enhancement, for example, wanting to have a pedestrian pathway or some other feature adjacent to the freeway, we'd probably want to do that a little bit earlier in the process. What we try and do is to kind of orient you to the process. We'll work to define a future route, where that will go, and then in the initial design, we'll design it up to about a 30% design level, and that basically establishes the footprint, the land necessary to build the freeway and the on and off ramps and the drainage and all the other features that go into the freeway. So when we start to talk about aesthetics, it's typically in the final design phase that we'd have that. Your question as far as the funding of that, there is this, ADOT by this region has a certain amount of funding that we can apply towards landscaping and enhancements as far as the look of walls and bridges and things of that nature. Anything over and above that is a agreement that we need to work out with the local community to fund that. So when you drive around the valley, basically the funding that we've got is essentially one color, a bridge with one color treatments. So it could be different shades of brown or whatever color it is. If you see other colors that are added, that was done through an agreement with the local city, and the local city is basically, they pay the cost of that, and they also pay the maintenance cost if there's graffiti or if it needs to be touched up. Scottsdale, I can tell you just for the extensive work that they've done, I don't have a per mile figure, but for that streetscape they did on the 101 as well as some of the other streets in that area was probably somewhere in the $5 million range. So that obviously is on more of the extreme. You've seen other communities who've done a downscaled version of that. A lot of enhancements in the Chandler area and other areas. Glendale, I know, has done some things as far as some of the enhancements, but those are the kinds of discussions we have typically with the cities in the design phase.
The second question I have deals with some complementary river crossings. The area north of Bell Road and the area, I guess, one of the alignments that's been talked about is Thomas Road and Bethany Home as bridge crossings. Does ADOT have you gotten involved in that, or is that pretty much a MAG discussion?
Whereabouts in the Northwest Valley?
Well, the discussion has been, one was to extend where the 101 goes from an east-west to a north-south about 75th Avenue to continue an off-ramp, a surface street, something that would connect with at least 99th Avenue, that would provide some relief to Union Hills and to Bell Road. But there were also some discussions of some opportunities to bridge between McDowell and, I forget where the next, Camelback.
Okay. There,
Indian School?
you can see in there that purple line, that's, it's hard to see on this map. There is a Beardsley connector that the city of Peoria has worked with the city of Glendale and then also worked with us. But the city of Peoria has been the lead on that. Our involvement in that is mainly looking at how it would connect with the 101 frontage road. And that would be the same thing as far as for any of those other crossings. We would look at how that connection would occur with the 101, for example. So a lot of that, to answer your question, that would really be a locally initiated project, but we would be involved from a standpoint of reviewing how that connection functions.
Any other questions for Matt? Well, I want to thank you again for
Appreciate you guys making the time. Thank
updating
you.
us, and it's probably something that, now that we're rolling and we've got some challenges in terms of particularly the 303 and some major amendments to our general plan, that we'll be able to have another update shortly. Is there anyone in the audience that has any questions or comments for Matt? Yes, sir. Can you come up and introduce yourself? And
Ilios Kari, and I am a citizen in the area. My question is, I can see all this planning to catch up with the situation that we are suffering now because it's not enough. I can see that some solution will start to be built in 2008 and keep going until 2010, 11, or 12. Once we reach that stage, this improvement will catch up with the needs at that time, will be to solve the problems today, and therefore will be behind schedule again, or this solution by 2011 will be taking care of the situation in 2015 or 20 or 25. I didn't get it with this conversation, so probably you say something, but the noise from the air conditioner, air handler was too loud in relation to the voice level of yours, and I didn't get it, but maybe it was mentioned. But if not, I would like to repeat the question. So when
that's an
when we're going to
appropriate
be-
question for
It's a very good question.
transportation planners to look at. What's the design year standard?
To answer your question, hopefully, can you hear me? If I talk in here, good. I'll try and talk a little loud. To answer the question, as far as any of the projects that are in the regional transportation plan, what we have, what the Maricopa Association of Governments has worked at is looking at the population in the valley in 2030 and what would need to be in place to facilitate the movement of traffic in 2030. So what we're talking about as far as the additional lanes on I-10, adding more lanes in the median of I-10 as well as on the outside. From a standpoint of planning, they've looked at it from a 2030 time horizon. Obviously, with more funding and with the ability to move up some of these other projects, that would allow us to meet those dates sooner and to perhaps try and get ahead of some of the growth. Right now, like the gentleman indicated, is we have a tremendous catch-up, and we're trying to keep ahead of the pace of growth.
Thank you. 2030.
put up until 2030?
Well, yeah, I'd be glad to talk to him here.
That's the design capacity window that they're looking at. We're building for the demand for 2030.
Correct. But 2011, with these jobs,
The-
were finished,
The political,
we will be already behind the game, like now?
yes.
Possible.
The political reality is that we are 20 to 25 years behind in our building of infrastructure in Arizona because of decisions made in the 60s and 70s, and we will never catch up. All we're and what we're trying to do is stay a little bit ahead of the ball that's rolling right behind us.
It's not going to be that bad.
Well, it will always be bad. It just won't be worse if we keep if we keep doing the funding.
Rob Tibbs at 16591 West Adams. Just one quick question. I know for the I-10, the alignment is at 55th Avenue, and so or at least from my thought, from 55th Avenue to the 101, I see that being a very large bottleneck. I'm assuming we're planning for the design, because I'm assuming that's just going to be a parking lot once that thing gets connected. So are you going to double lanes, or, I mean, what's going to happen?
Question about the South Mountain Freeway and what would happen. The part of the regional transportation plan and part of the South Mountain Freeway, wherever that connection occurs, we're going to need to improve I-10 about 4.5 miles on each side of that connection. So at 55th Avenue, what that means is we need more lanes on I-10 between I-17 and the Loop 101. So you will have significant improvements to Interstate 10 over and above what you have today. I think as far as the lane configurations right now today, much of I-10 is 4 lanes. In that particular area, it's 4 lanes and a HOV lane in each direction. What we've looked at is that we may need to have a freeway that's 8 or 9 lanes in each direction. So.
And then for that, once you make that connection, that going from 4 to 8 in each direction, what's the timeline for that? Is that 5, 6 years after the connection?
No, that's part of the development of the South Mountain Freeway connection would be the improvements to Interstate 10. An example that we're working on right now that's under construction in the far East Mesa area is the Loop 202 freeway and how it connects with US 60. We're in the midst right now of widening US 60 as well as building the Loop 202 connection to US 60. So you'll have, in that area, it's 5 lanes and a HOV lane in each direction. So the improvements to Interstate 10 between the 101 and I-17 would be done in conjunction with a South Mountain Freeway connection being built and connecting to I-10. So you'd have concurrent construction efforts going on. Exactly. Between Interstate 17 and the 101, that entire, it's about 8 miles. That would be under construction on I-10, more lanes, so you'd have additional lanes on I-10 if you came off the South Mountain Freeway and headed east towards downtown Phoenix, as well as if you came off the South Mountain Freeway and headed west towards Goodyear.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that had any questions or comments? Again, I want to thank you for being here, and we probably want to see you again in maybe a year's time and update us on what's going on, maybe sooner.
Maybe sooner. It's probably, for some of these decisions, it'd probably be good to come out sooner.
Okay,
Great.
great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. We have two other items on our agenda this evening. If you would like to speak, I would ask you to fill out a speaker's card, and each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Before you speak, identify yourself by clearly stating your name and your address for the record. Okay. Next is our consent agenda. At the time each business agenda item is presented by staff, chairman then provide time for citizen input and comments. The consent agenda is 2 items. Case 05-700-00005, Sun DS Farms Minor General Plan Amendment, public hearing to consider a request for a minor amendment to the City of Goodyear General Plan to facilitate the development of approximately 160 acres of land generally located in the southwest corner of Estrella Parkway and Lower Buckeye Road. The applicant is Ed Bull, representing Sun DS Farms, and the staff recommends that that be continued to our regular Planning Commission meeting on August 16th. The agenda has been corrected to be consistent with the staff Kodak. The second is case 05-200-00027, Sun DS Farms rezoning, a public hearing to consider a request to rezone approximately 160 acres of land generally located at the southwest corner of Estrella Parkway and Lower Buckeye Road from the agricultural urban AU district to the preliminary planned area development PAD district. The applicant is Ed Bull, representing Sun DS Farms. The staff recommends that be continued to our August 16 regular commission meeting. Is there anyone that would like to take either of those 2 items off the consent agenda? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair, to approve the consent agenda, items A and B, to the August 2006 meeting.
I have a motion recommending approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second for Mr. Gelzer. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First case in old business, case 05-300-00010, Panda Express drive-through restaurant use permit. Public hearing to consider a request for the approval of a use permit for the Panda Express drive-through restaurant on a .84 acre site generally located 1,600 feet north of Van Buren Street on the west side of Estrella Parkway within the proposed Canyon Trails Plaza Phase 2 Commercial Center. The applicant is ITRA Group, Inc., and have a staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Karen Craver, the acting planning manager, and I'm presenting for Steve Cratchit tonight because he and his wife Marina had a baby girl yesterday morning. As the chairman said, this is part of Canyon Trails Plaza Phase 2, Phase 1 being the Safeway Center. The convenience use is for a restaurant with drive-through. The applicant is proposing menu board signs facing Estrella Parkway. The city sign code strictly prohibits that. The menu boards are not to be visible at all from the street. The applicant has been informed of this requirement numerous times and has chosen to leave the menu boards facing Estrella. As such, staff is recommending denial. We hope that you support us in that. However, should you choose to recommend approval, we have stipulations in the staff report we would appreciate you using.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? If there's a representative for the applicant. I'm sorry.
I have a question. We've heard some similar cases of this before, Karen, and is there an alternative plan that you have, or is there an inverted drawing that we could see, or we don't have one of those at this point in time?
I don't have an inverted drawing to show you, but I can tell you as a resident of Levine Village within the city of Phoenix, I made a site visit to a brand new Panda Express there this weekend, and they have their drive-throughs and their menu boards located behind the restaurant, totally hidden from the view of the street. So it certainly is possible.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Yes, sir.
Mark Russell, 2015 West Desert Hills Drive, Desert Hills, Arizona. I actually am project manager for Panda Express, also here for ITRA. I'm here to say that we have worked diligently with staff through this whole process and have come up with a numerous number of plans trying to redesign this building to accommodate staff. We've looked at turning the building sideways, backwards. The only alternate plan that we have that we did not submit to this was actually reviewed by staff, looked at. It doesn't really work. It creates a bottleneck in the back. In the main entrance, as you come around the back, most people would have to pull a U-turn to get into it. We've done extensive attempts to do everything from extensive landscaping out front, plain view analyses, building a screen wall, 5-foot screen wall, and a plain. I don't know if they've attached the plain view analysis that. That we've done, but you actually, from the street, you're a good 170 feet from the building. I think you have a colored elevation that will actually show we've built the screen wall that will be over 5 feet. You actually won't visibly be able to see that sign. I know the codes state that you cannot put a sign that can be visually seen from the street. It doesn't say that we can't put the sign there, and we're not trying to force the issue of we need the sign there. We are to the point of we've tried numerous other designs, and the issues with the flow of the parking lot, having people cross the drive-through, like one of the plans that somewhat works, a majority of all our customers would have to walk through the drive-through to get to the store. We're just asking for consideration to look at this, that, I was really hoping Steve would be here. I've personally probably had 5 meetings with Steve and a previous staff that was here, trying to explain our situation. We do understand what staff has been through with some previous cases, since we first submitted, and we do know that that some of the commissioners and some of the people here have had issues with that. But I'm just here to say that we've had made every effort to try to put those menu boards in the back. And because of the layout, if you'll actually look at the layout here, if we can turn the building over, because McDonald's and their drive-through here, we would have to actually get rid of all McDonald's parking to put a drive-through or drive for the front-end parking. The only way we could actually push the building over, we would have absolutely no parking in the front or the sides of our building. All our parking would have to be in the back, and you'd have to walk around the drive-through or through the drive-through to get it. And we've done, I think, up to 6 plans now, trying to move this building. And this is the only one that really seems to have any kind of continuity, and it's kind of the bottom line for us as far as what we can do. If we have to turn this building, the other one shows, actually, if you look at this back here, the only other option is to actually turn this building, and then everybody coming in has to come up here and make a U-turn into the drive-through here. So, and if we have, a good day and we have more than 6 or 7 cars stacking, you'll have actually people stacking back into the main drive-through. So, it's a very tough site to work on. It's not that we don't typically we don't like to put the menu boards out in front of our store. The staff mentioned that many of our other stores, if it lays out, yes, we prefer to have our drive-through signs in the back. This one just because of the site that was given to us, we weren't able to make it work.
Let me make an observation, and that might simplify things for us here. The prior case that was most recent is the El Pollo Loco.
Yes, sir.
They had a parcel in a 3-parcel arrangement because they weren't able to create the appropriate circulation, menu board location, and so forth. That forced the redesign of a larger segment.
Mm-hmm.
If their potential sale contract had not allowed them that opportunity, they would have been out looking for another site. And I'm not going to tell you directly, but I'm going to offer this, and I think some of the other commissioners have similar thoughts. A 5-foot screen wall on Estrella Parkway because of the overlay district is not going to work. There reaches a point where you say, I've done everything possible to make this fit. It's not going to fit. As much as we would love to have a Panda Express there, maybe it's time to look at another site. Okay? That's my comment. Is there any other comments or questions? Ms. Loretano.
I would just say I pretty much agree. I've seen the other fast food, several have come through, and they've all been able to meet the signage code of the city of Goodyear. They've all maybe switched their building a little or prepared it in such a way that we don't have that problem. And my concern was also what the chairman stated with regard to the overlay district. In this area, we're looking to make the gateway of Goodyear, and this is going to be on the way to the city center. And to have a larger wall there, just right in front of your area, I just don't see. I think you might either want to, like he said, look at another site or see if there is another way to do it.
I'll give you my 2 cents, or my. You basically have 2 options here. You have an option to either take continuance and redesign it so that your drive-through works from the back end of the building comes around and basically is similar to the McDonald's configuration, so that it drives that way and everything comes in on that way. Or you can take a denial and see if City Council will override Planning Commission. That's pretty much what your options are going to be. So I'll just leave it at that, because I am supporting the chairman's position.
Other questions or comments? Anything further?
Really, at this point, not really. I could get into specifics that we've tried to lay out as the McDonald's. It's just our corporate layout inside the store does not give us as many options. If you've ever been to a Panda Express, we have kind of a diagonal.
No, I know it. I've been there. I've been to different ones. All I'm saying is, then this may not be the site, and you may need to find an alternative site.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this case? If not, I'll close the public hearing and ask for commission action.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend denial of case number 0530000010, special use permit for Panda Express.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Ms. Loretano. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Commissioners.
The next item on our agenda is probably something that's been long awaited and is a pretty significant step forward in terms of our community. City Center Specific Area Master Plan Final Review Draft dated June 28, 2006. We'll have a public hearing to review and receive input on the draft City Center Specific Area Master Plan dated June 28th. The applicant is the City of Goodyear. We're going to be having a hearing this evening, and we will have further hearings on a special meeting on August the 2nd, at which time we will take final action on the plan. Mr. Kraus.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I'm very pleased to present this hopefully final review draft of the City Center Specific Area Plan. A lot of hard and diligent work went into this plan by a number of individuals. Just very, very briefly, refresh your memory, there was a technical advisory committee with 23 members were appointed by the mayor and council in February of 2004. So this goes back to 2004. And then once again, in I think September of 2004, we had 3 additional members appointed. Instead of reading all the names, but there are 2 individuals in the audience that are members of the TAC, or Technical Advisory Committee. Margaret Horstman's here, and Jamie Cavalier. Jamie Cavalier was the vice chair, and Georgia Lord was the chairperson who gave us guidance. Oh, and I'm sorry, and Sherry Laurentano. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sherry, sorry. Planning Commission, and Gabriel was on the commission too, or in the TAC. Anybody else on there? I'm missing on the list. So we had quite a bit of good input. Would you like to say anything, Dan? Is there anything you'd like to say?
I just want to thank everyone that participated in the.
It's being recorded.
It's a formality.
I want to thank everyone for their participation in this 2-year endeavor and sticking with it and really taking individual ideas of each one of us and what our expectations were and shaping those into a concept that we can now look to put some framework around and move forward to hopefully not too long actual reality. So I would like everyone here that was part of that and all those that aren't here that they really did contribute a great deal to our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you on behalf of the city to all members of the Technical Advisory Committee for all your diligent work. Excuse me. The City Center Master Plan provides basically the policy guidance and the design standards for developing a high-intensity mixed-use corridor at the intersection of Estrella Parkway and Yuma Road, of which Leslie Dornfeld of HDR is going to provide you an overview of the PowerPoint here and go over sort of the framework for the plan. And so I wanted to let you know about that. There's two major landowners that were impacted by the plan. There was a specific area plan that has regulatory elements and non-regulatory elements. So we've worked very closely with the two stakeholders. The majority landowner was Sun MP, and representative of Sun MP, representatives of Sun MP are here this evening. We've had extensive discussions with them about the plan, and they've offered numerous comments and suggestions, constructive, on the plan. In addition, Wood Property, representative of Wood Property is also here. It's Karen Keith, and they have provided comments. I think I recently received some additional comments and distributed to you, and we've also met with them, and they've had given us very good constructive comments throughout the process. So unless you have any questions of me, I'll turn it over to Leslie Dornfeld, who was the main consultant on the project, and she will provide you an overview on a PowerPoint.
Thanks. As Harvey mentioned, my name is Leslie Dornfeld. I'm from HDR. We're the consulting firm that you hired to develop the City Center Master Plan. I have a presentation here tonight to go through, but I just want to echo both Harvey and Ms. Cavalier's comments. It was really an honor to be able to work with this committee. It was a lot of heartfelt thought and real commitment to this project, and I think as a result of that commitment and time spent on the part of the city and the staff, and also the private landowners who really gave it their all. It was a really cooperative venture and a product that the city could really be proud of. So with that, I'll start on the presentation. This is the city center. It's identified with the square around it, and the city center is at the junction of Estrella Parkway and Yuma Road. The entire area is 200 acres. The south half of the city center is evenly split by Estrella Parkway, and those are 60 acres each. And the north half, north of Yuma Road, is also evenly split by Estrella Parkway. It's 40 acres each, and the northwest corner is the parcel that's the city-owned parcel. Sun MP owns the remaining 140 acres, and 20 acres are owned by the Woods property. Tonight, the presentation is just going to go through the planning process and what we've done, the incredible effort that's been put into this process. Then I'll briefly review the plan. Then I'll talk about the architectural and design guidance that's included in the plan. And I just want to point out that was based on a lot of TAC input. The TAC went out on their own and photographed city centers throughout the valley, and a lot of that was used in the architectural and design guidance and developed through the process. And then also, we'll talk quickly about some of the next steps. It's come up a lot, how are we going to implement this? And the idea of public-private partnerships has come up quite a bit. So I just have a little bit of information about things that you might want to think about. As you move this forward, maybe ways to look at implementing this project. As we started this process, the first thing we did was we looked at the market, and we had a market study prepared by Robert Charles Lesser and Associates. We also looked at existing plans and other documents that had influences on the city center. You mentioned tonight the gateway standards, for example, older city center plans. There was a truck route study, and of course the general plan, which continues to be the guiding document and the larger framework in which this plan sets. We also looked at other city centers, not only in the city, in the valley, but around the country, and in fact internationally as far as Australia, and looked at those to decide what kinds of attributes city centers have that Goodyear would like. And then we also had a charrette, and this charrette was really the major kickoff of the project. There were probably around 200 residents involved in it. The public kickoff started, I believe, on October 1st. We had an opening night at Palm Valley. The mayor was there, the entire committee was there. We had quite a few citizens there. We had the charrette, the bulk of the citizen participation portion of the charrette was on Saturday. We had about 200 people show up at the Desert View High School. They did a placemaking exercise which helped describe the kind of place they hoped to see the city center become, the kind of activities and uses they wanted to see there, and also a visual preference survey, and that was used to help us develop the design guidance for the city center and the look and the feel of the place. Sunday, we went back to the office, Saturday night and Sunday, I should add, and came back with 3 preliminary concepts, which we presented to you Sunday afternoon. There were about 125, 150 people there. It was a great turnout. And I just really want to, again, thank the city and all its residents for the effort. There were 3 really key things that came out of all the work we did at the charrette. Open space, recreation was important. People wanted to be able to have a place to recreate in the city center, and they wanted it to be connected by green spaces. Another important concept was that the city center had to be pedestrian focused. People wanted to be able to walk around there, and all ages of people needed to be able to walk safely. Kids all the way up to elderly and older citizens. And then also there was this concept of a main street. People just wanted a focal place, like the center of town. And so the main street concept was very prevalent throughout everything we did. Taking those concepts, we came back to you on Sunday with some sketch ideas and roughed these out into 3 preliminary alternatives. The first one was pretty much the plan that's been in place for a long time. The second one looked at creating a main street or more of a core, keeping the access of Estrella and Yuma open. And then the third one looked at really reconfiguring the streets to take those streets away and took this concept of a pedestrian environment and a core to kind of the outside edge. We took those comments back, we took those plans to the TAC and got comments. We had a couple of meetings. One I'd just like to point out we had in December was held after we distributed the 3 alternatives with a description of each to every single household in Goodyear with a door hanger. And it also included a survey. We got back hundreds, literally hundreds of comments that we put together and used to help us digest and come up with an alternative to start working through. And what we came back with in March of 2005 was a draft plan. And this general concept has stayed fairly constant throughout the process. The northwest corner, the city-owned parcel, is the center of administration, but it's also a retail core. It has a grand civic space in it, and it's really the civic heart of the city center. The northeast corner is looked at more as hotel, entertainment, uses, and that was to begin to blend it into the mixed use and residential uses developing to the north and to the northeast of the city center. The southwest parcel, when we started originally within the city center, there was a stadium concept. Now, of course, that concept has moved south, but always surrounding the city center was the Estrella Aerospace Park, Air Park.
City Center Air Park.
City Center Air Park, thank you, I'm sorry. And And that concept, so that southwest portion was designed to really meld with those kinds of uses that would have been part of the City Center Air Park development that's existing. An approved PAD, does not build, excuse me. And then to the southwest, there is existing residential, it's single-family residential, and that's always been envisioned as the predominantly residential area of the city center, so that blends again into that residential portion of the city. One of the big concepts and big discussions was how's this thing going to be phased and how's it going to start off, and we've always said that the public sector part of it, the city's parcel, is the heart and needs to set the bar. Initially and moving through this process, we've said that as the city center improvements go in and the ones that are made by the city, these really are going to set the tone for the project. And when they go in, they need to go in right, so folks continue to realize the significance of this project and its opportunities. And as that bar is set, other development will follow suit and blend in. Now, that might not happen in a linear process, but that's the ultimate thought, and this is an older plan. After we came out with that plan, which was, as I'd mentioned, in March, and kind of through the process, we've had a lot of meetings. So overall in the entire process, we're at about 18 kind of public TAC and landowner meetings. That doesn't include the countless meetings we've had with city staff and kind of phone calls and answering questions. But this is a general list, and if I were going to summarize them, I think I counted 7 TAC meetings, 8 landowner meetings, 4 public meetings, including the charrette, I think that was a general overview. I don't know if that adds to 18, but those were the numbers I remember. As a result of a lot of meetings we had in March through September, we talked about a lot of topics. One of the big issues in that plan that I showed you was circulation. There was a real desire on the part of the TAC to keep Estrella Parkway a through street. As you heard earlier this evening, and Matt talking about when those transportation improvements will be built in Goodyear, until those get built, there may be some traffic load increase on Estrella Parkway and on Yuma Road, just as the area builds out and until those other projects get constructed to relieve it. So we looked very carefully at a variety of alignments. We also looked carefully at land uses and how that could work. The stadium that was going to be built in the city center became much less of a reality and no reality as we moved through the process. So we had to make adjustments for that. And ultimately, in September of 2005, we brought you back a final alternative, which is the alternative that we're presenting to you tonight. And this alternative really focuses the most regulation of the city center in the area within an area called the Main Street Loop, or the core of the city center. And it keeps the building heights and the most intensity in that core, and then has less regulatory components as one moves outside of the Main Street Loop. It divides the city center into 4 areas. The northwest area is still staying that civic area with a retail heart, as well a large community park where civic events could be held. It double faces onto the civic areas as well as to the north where there's a city park that's planned, and also respects the existence of the Desert Edge School. And there's a main street in there that's a very retail-focused main street, and that I'll talk a little bit more about. But it's a very pedestrian-oriented place where folks would go and shop, sit outside and dine, park. It's a very pedestrian-focused area. The northeast corner quadrant, or the northeast district, is, again, as I've mentioned, the retail entertainment district. As one moves outside of Main Street, some housing is a potential use there as well. And then the southeast district keeps its original intent of the business park district, this time without the stadium concept in it. And the southwest quadrant and the southwest district would be more residentially focused. All of these districts, to some extent, have some mixed uses. As an overriding theme, we took the interest in the community from the charrette, the interest in the mountains, the interest in the desert, and the southwest focus. And how we brought that into the city center was creating themes that would guide the architecture and design in each district, or would be prevalent. In the northeast district is the concept of wind and shade, and the reason wind and breeze. The reason we use that is the winds come from the southwest, and there are ways that you can configure buildings and design public spaces to take advantage of those breezes. On the southeast quadrant, we're looking at concepts of desert rock and earth and vegetation, stone that would really bring the concepts and the colors of the desert forward. The southwest portion is water and the judicious use of water, but water is key to the desert. The desert couldn't survive in the desert without it. And in the northwest corner, the city part, the concepts of sun and shade implemented by the use of trellises, structures that create shade patterns on the ground, or how buildings are situated to create other kinds of shade and shade patterns and sun patterns. The approximate square footage of this whole program is somewhere between 1 3/4 and 2 million square feet, depending on the exact height of the buildings as they come through. When we look at the site, we can get in about 6,500 parking spaces. Again, that's not an exact number, but generally there is adequate parking on the site. These are just some visions and views of what it could look like. This would be the intersection of Estrella and Yuma, and you can, and that's looking to the east along Yuma. You kind of see at the corner on your, I don't know what it would be, I guess it's your right, the opening that would create this open area at the intersection of those that would really celebrate the city center in a very different development pattern. So as one enters the city center, you know you're there. You know you're in a special place in Goodyear. This is the concept for the one of the open spaces. It could be the civic space, or it could be the water feature in the residential area. But in this particular one, it's the civic space, and you notice retail rings it. So there's this idea of a wonderful open area ringed by retail, and just a real place where, maybe mom could sit and have, or dad could sit and have a iced coffee while their kids play around, or just a very lovely active space that could really go 24/7. This is a concept of what we're calling the arroyo, an open space that links all 4 districts could be. But the idea of this open space is that it winds itself through all 4 districts of the city center. This is a concept that could maybe happen in the public area, where the arroyo could go between 2 sets of stores, and those stores could be double fronted or front out onto the arroyo and the open space as well. And then here's a final just vision for the city center that gives you an idea of height. As I mentioned, the highest buildings would be within what we're calling the core, the Main Street Loop. This gives you, these actually are 150-foot buildings. It's a scale drawing. Just gives you an idea of what that height would feel like, potentially around that core, if all the buildings were built to the maximum height. I might add here that one of the really important comments that we got out of the charrette were the views of the mountains. We did extensive view studies of the city center and tried to get both the peaks of the Estrellas and of the White Tanks from the intersection of Estrella and Yuma Road, and it's just impossible. Not only could you not build above something like 10 feet in the city center, you couldn't build outside 20 feet outside of it to go south. To go north, you'd have to configure the buildings in such a lopsided way. It'd really be unattractive at this point. We couldn't figure an attractive way to do it. So the view sheds aren't part of the city center program, but wherever possible, it'd be great if those could be maintained, but we recognize the difficulties in doing that. Now I'm going to go from the process of developing the plan to what the plan is. And the document that you have in front of you consists of 6 parts. There's an executive summary, which we haven't done yet. We're going to do that once the document has moved through the process. There's a background and purpose section. Then we talk about supporting regulations and legal regulatory authority. Then there is the regulatory plan. There's an architectural theme section, or the architectural guidelines, and then there are appendices that will include all the background documentation and basically cover what I just spoke about. You don't have a lot of the background documentation just because we didn't want to give you reams of paper. The plan, the executive summary, and the background and purpose section, I'll just talk about those briefly. The executive summary is exactly what it says it is. The background, it'll be a quick summary of the plan. It'll contain the key points. The background and purpose section includes a description of the site. It talks about the context of the site, some of the surrounding land uses, and then also the history of planning on the site and other documents that affect that planning environment. The supporting regulations and legal authority describes what this plan can and can't regulate. It talks about where the authority comes from. Within this section, we also talk about the amendment process. The plan does conform to the general plan. The general plan talks about a city center plan being developed in the area that we've developed it for, with all of the land uses that we've talked about. Again, the general plan, it is in conformance with the plan, and each of the 4 districts are in conformance with the plan. There's a star on the general plan, and this plan goes underneath that star. In the regulatory section, we also require any development that is proposed in the city center to be submitted through the PAD process, and that PAD process include in it a phasing plan, so that we'll know how things get built out in the city center, and the city can work on coordinating and timing. And it also, in the regulatory process, as I'd mentioned, lays out the amendment procedures. Probably the most significant thing here that is not in your plan to point out is there was a lot of concern that some of the requirements for the major amendment may create difficulties if there are opportunities that could come about for development within the center. So there's in your matrix, there's a note in there that says what we'll include in the amendment process is in special instances, the planning director, I think we said, may allow a major amendment to this plan to be taken not within the sequence of just the usual general plan amendment process. But generally, if it's a major amendment, it goes just in the same cycle as the general plan amendment process, and minor amendments are heard in the same way you hear general plan minor amendments, much like the one you continued tonight. The regulatory plan includes a lot of chapters. One is on land use. We have a chapter on open space. We have a chapter on circulation, and we have a chapter on landscape, and then a chapter on site planning. And I'm going to quickly go through each of these chapters tonight. My intent is not to go through every regulation and every policy, but to give you a broad overview, and then I'll be happy to respond to any specific questions. Generally, each of the regulatory chapters includes an overview, and then there's kind of regulations and policies that are city center-wide, and then what we begin to do is talk about, there it goes, I'm sorry, policies that would occur within the Main Street loop, excuse me, mostly which are land uses, and then other policies that are either district-specific or street-specific. The land use regulations, now I'm going to just go through each of these specific A, B, C, D chapters. The land use regulations, those create 4 regulatory districts. The first district is the Northwest District. It's the retail, civic, and community district. There's a chart that establishes for this district the overall land uses, and I'll talk about that, and also predominant and complementary land uses. The Northeast District, as I'd mentioned before, is hotel, residential, some retail, and residential, retail, and office uses. It establishes the Southwest District as a residential and retail district, and it establishes the Southeast District as a business park office district. So those 4 districts are regulatory and put in the land use regulations. Also within the land use why isn't this going down? Hold on one second here. There we go. Also within the land use district are the land use regulations. There's a table that includes uses that are applicable for all 4 districts from the edges of the city center, and that's defined by Goodyear Boulevard, and the core is defined by that Main Street area. So this table applies to everything to the edges of Goodyear Boulevard, the entire district. And then we also have a table of predominant and complementary uses that are applicable within the Main Street loop, because again, that's a little bit more intense, and we're a little bit more careful in that area. And then we are also within the land use section adding, this is not in your document, a policy that, I guess it would be a policy that if in the event that the stadium is constructed, the 20 acres that are covered by the MOU of the stadium would be exempted or just excluded from the city center. The next section is the open space section, and the open space section establishes, I think, 5 kinds of open space. Civic space, which is mostly in the northwest section. It's the civic space that's the main open area within the retail that would be used for festivals and events, and connects into the City Hall administrative buildings, and would also front on the cultural buildings that are envisioned for this area. These are some ideas of some of the civic space that could occur. I think this is Fruitvale in California. The next kind of space established by the open space section is what we're calling community open spaces. And those are the open spaces in the other 3 districts that would be used as open public areas. Again, in the center, they would be the most visible parts of where the themes for each of those areas would come through, the idea of the wind and the breeze and the rock and the vegetation and water. And those are envisioned in each area. Each district is required, all development within each district is required to have a 10% open space requirement and meet this array of spaces that I'm going through at this point in time. And here's an example of what some of these community spaces could look like. Another type of open space established by the plan is the private open space, and mostly where we envision this is the yards or the courtyards or parts of private open space that would come as part of the residential development in the southwest section. It doesn't mean that private open space couldn't occur other places within the plan, but it does establish that kind of place. Then the 4th type of open space that's envisioned is the arroyo, and the arroyo is a multiple-use connection that would be a green space, 24 feet wide, that would include some kind of a wash feature and a trail. And the Arroyo would cross and connect the entire city center at the Main Street Loop. So at each connection of the Main Street Loop to either Yuma or to Estrella, that's where the Arroyo would kind of blend back in and go with that crossing for pedestrian safety and bike safety. And then here's some examples of an Arroyo that could occur. The one on the bottom is probably closer to a desert environment. And then the fifth type of open space that's established is what we're calling the formal open space. And those are the 4 open corners at the intersection of Estrella Parkway and Yuma Road. And that's really the heart of the city center. It's when you drive through it, the place opens up. You get to look into all these different kinds of spaces and really see what's going on in the city center. And this is just an example of what a plaza could look like. I think the best description, and I have to apologize for not having a picture of it, is the in the valley is at Camelback and Scottsdale Road on the southwest corner. There's a setback restaurant there, and that has kind of an open plaza, and that gives you just an idea of what could happen. It's smaller than what we envisioned for Goodyear, but it's a good example. Why is this happening? These things keep on going backwards. This is the streets within the city center. There are a variety of streets established as a regulatory element of the plan. The first street is a scenic arterial. That street has a 150-foot right-of-way. Estrella Parkway and Yuma Road are designated city center scenic arterials. I'd like to point out that in the general plan, the city center scenic arterial was called Goodyear Boulevard. We've switched those names around. This road is a 150-foot right-of-way. It would have limited left turns. There would be a pedestrian signal at Yuma and Estrella, and ultimately that would be upgraded as pedestrian activity increases to be more and more pedestrian focused. And we will be preparing an alternative cross-section that proposes parking along those roadways. As other facilities are built and traffic may decrease, or as needed, it may be possible to put parking along both those roads, again, kind of emphasizing the pedestrian environment and really turning this into a very different kind of a place than you might see on other parts of those roadways. The city center arterial would be Goodyear Boulevard, and that also has a 150-foot right-of-way. This is envisioned as a higher speed access road. People that didn't want to hopefully slow down as they drove through the city center, just wanted to get around it and get through it, could use this. But it's also an access road to some of the office buildings within the city center, and it would have two-way traffic. And you can see it's a much higher volume road. It has a center turn lane. It doesn't have a median in it in this juncture. The other road section that's established is the pedestrian street, and that has a 130-foot right-of-way, and that's Main Street. And this pedestrian street, Main Street, although it has a 130-foot right-of-way, it has it because there's diagonal parking along it. And you need a little extra right-of-way for back out and turning movements that were safe. There would be adjacent to it, the sidewalk would be separated by a hardscape type of landscape as opposed to a DG or decomposed granite or dirt landscape to really encourage people. We envision people just crossing at all parts of this roadway, traffic moving very slowly. It would only have one lane in either direction, and it's a very tight, hopefully tight roadway, safe but tight. And then the fourth type of road that's established in the city center is what's called the neighborhood street. This is in conformance with the current city standards. It's also 130 foot of right-of-way. And those are the streets that we would envision creating the smaller blocks within the city center plan that you see. They could have parking along them and landscaping and, of course, sidewalks. The landscape element, we require a master landscape plan. That's one of the regulatory elements. There is a regulatory plant list in the appendix that can be used. Basically, what we're promoting is a very lush, drought-tolerant landscape palette. And it also requires trees and ground cover. You can't just stick dirt in there. So it's pretty thorough so that you get a good landscape program.
Leslie, can I stop
Sure.
you for just 1 second? One of the discussions that we've had within the last couple of months regarding trees and planting is that it's been the practice in most of the documents that we have that we've used, 36-inch box tree, and I think the emphasis or my desire is to go to a caliper dimension instead of the box. It seems like the trees are getting smaller and the boxes are getting bigger, and I think the caliper measurement is a more precise way of ensuring that we get what we want.
Okay, we can take care of that.
Thank you.
The site planning section is probably the one with the most regulations, and your document, you'll have lines, items that are underlined that you notice throughout the document. Those are the regulatory items. We had a lot of discussion about putting those into a chart, and after really working through that and talking about that with staff, we decided instead of we were concerned that what would happen is people would just pull out this chart of regulations, and all of the policies which really are very important and really give a lot of life to the city center would ultimately just get put by the wayside. So after a lot of thought and discussion, we decided to keep them all into one document and just underline them so that there was no mistaking what was regulation and then what was policy, and where there was some flexibility and discretion on the part of staff. The site plan covers a range of things. I have to apologize, I don't have my glasses, so I can't read you that list, but I know it includes setbacks, building heights, windows and facades, building orientation, parking, shading and lighting, signs, I think that's it. Landscape service alleys as well, and building orientation. And so a lot of regulations dealing with all of those kinds of topics are in there. I'm just going to focus on a couple that we think are critical in the city center and probably a little bit different than the way things are typically constructed in the valley. One is the setbacks. We're requiring all of the buildings on Estrella Parkway and on Yuma Road and along the main street to abut the curb. We want a street wall. We want a really nice pedestrian environment. On Goodyear Boulevard, we've recognized that that's a little bit more, it's in a less intense part of the city center, and we're allowing setbacks, landscape setbacks up to 50 feet in that area. In terms of the pedestrian orientation, there's a lot of policies and regulations that talk about you need to provide your primary building access onto a street. Your primary building access can't be from a parking lot, it can't be from a garage, it's got to be from the street, it's got to be from an open space. We don't want any blank walls over 30 feet. And what that means is not, you can't put just, metal lines as decorations on the wall. We initially had a glazing requirement, but what we're trying to create is an active pedestrian environment. And if you have a blank space over 30 feet, you really begin to discourage pedestrian activity. It becomes a dead space. We want service areas screened, and also shading needs to cover 70% of your ground floor facade so that it is, again, a pleasant pedestrian environment. And you can see from those pictures some examples of how those things could be accomplished. Building height, within the city center core, which is Main Street, it's 150 feet. That's regulated by, it can't go higher because it's regulated by the Goodyear Airport, but that would also include, one of the questions that came up, and you'll see in your matrix, would also include cell towers, because it is an airport regulation. So if you're going to stick a cell tower on top of a building, you've got to be under that 150 feet. And also on Estrella and Yuma Boulevard, we required a minimum of 3 stories, and we did that. Thank you. We did that for a couple of reasons. One is you want to create a street room, and you need a certain amount of building height to do that. Otherwise, the street seems very wide, and you get lost. There's no sense of enclosure as a pedestrian. And then also on Goodyear Boulevard, southwest, we've limited height on that roadway, that first row of buildings, to 48 feet, and that's because there's a residential area that's single-family directly across from it, and while there's a 78-foot height limit between the Main Street area and Goodyear Boulevard, that particular area, we felt 78 feet might be a little high for those adjacent residential buildings. In terms of parking, parking is accessed from the streets, and all the parking needs to be, if it's a parking lot, it needs to be landscaped. I think we said every third bay. The parking structures need to have retail integrated into them around the ground floor, so you're never walking in the city center next to a parking garage. You're walking next to a store, you're walking next to a storefront office, you're walking next to a lobby of a building. There's always something that you could walk into as you're walking along the street there. And then we don't want parking to be visible from the street. So we don't want, for example, any parking lots to be visible from Main Street. And we would not like any parking lots to be visible at the pedestrian level from Estrella Boulevard or Parkway or from Yuma Road. There was a lot of questions about the amount of parking and the location of parking. This is just a diagram that shows you in this plan where we've proposed parking. There's a couple parking garages that are envisioned in the city center, the city's portion of the city center. There's an example of some parking garages that could occur in the northeast section. And then you'll also see some red squares on sites with no buildings on them. And again, the thought here is that in the beginning, there would be surface parking adjacent to buildings, and as land values increase, that parking would get structured or put underground with new buildings. Now I'll talk a little bit about the architectural guidance section. The style that we've envisioned for the city center is the Southwest Contemporary. The more and more we talk to people, the Southwest was important, but they wanted it to be contemporary. And as we went through this guidance, we realized that the building that you see today wasn't envisioned 15 years ago. 15 years ago, we didn't see any of those kind of neat round corners on buildings. So we had to create a guidance that allowed for some flexibility in design so that you wouldn't be forcing folks to build things in 15 years that look dated the minute they went up. In the same vein, though, we wanted to make sure that whatever we did said Goodyear, that there was some cohesion in the city center and there was a unity in thought and design. So part of that is the district design concepts. They're intended to be timeless, and you can't really get any more timeless than the desert. We looked at patterns and textures, roof lines and materials, colors. We talked about the use of effluent, and we also talked a little bit about water features in these sections. And instead of talking about the specific guidance in detail, what I decided to do was just show you how it could flesh out in a building and development and designs. So, for example, here you're going to see the punched windows that we ask for. We also allow recessed entries of up to 10 feet in buildings. That's an example of how that could occur. The 70% shade, there's an example of how that could occur. That's a zero setback building. So you see a building set right up to the street. There is access there for that hidden parking. There was a lot of discussion, how could parking happen on Main Street? That's an example of how it could happen. The access is hidden. And then also the use of desert landscape and a hardscape program here. Here's another building where we have the punched windows. Here's some diagonal parking on the street. There's a recessed entry. There's a 70% shaded ground floor and then a zero setback building. There's the use of hardscape again, and then the desert landscaping. And then here's a pedestrian amenity just sticking there in the corner. Here's a more intense building. This might be something you could see maybe along Yuma Road or Estrella Parkway. And that's got the hidden mechanical equipment. There you see some of the roof materials that we'll talk about, and I'll give you some examples of that later also. Punched windows here. There's the 70% shade. Here's your recessed entry. There's something different that was done with it. There's the zero setback again, that abutting the building. And then the use of a hardscape, this time in terms of ballards, actually I think that allowed a pull-up. And then some pedestrian amenities on the side of the building. This is a building that could occur, for example, on Goodyear Boulevard. There's the punched windows. There's your hidden or screened parking behind that setback. There's your setback. There's your desert landscaping. And then here's a very intense building. I don't know that this would occur in the city center, but just to give you an idea. Again, some hidden mechanical equipment, punched windows, zero setback. There's your shaded ground floor, your recessed entry, your hardscape pedestrian amenities, some of the community space that could occur, for example, in front of a building. And then I also just use this picture to kind of bring us into the concept of the patterns and textures that we put in the architectural guidance. And you can just see here where some of those patterns and textures are used. It's hard to envision them when you see them in blocks in the plan. So here's how they could be used in a building. There are some of the palettes that could be used in the building as accent colors. This picture shows you what we've added is the concept, and I have to tell you, these colors are coming out very differently on your projector than they look on the screen. Those are not the actual colors as primaries. They're not as bright. There's a lot of red in those. But there's the example of how some of those primary colors could be used, and then here's an example of how some of the accent colors can be used. And what you'll see on the left is the primary colors that we'll be adding to the architectural palette. Yeah, those oranges are not as orange or red. They're much dustier. Again, the use of primary and accent colors just to show you where they could be used and how that can happen. So how that all really comes together to create a nice program of design and development, and how you can get diversity as well with these constant thematic elements. Here's an example of how some of the textures could be used. And then here's an example of roof materials. There's an example on the right there of some screen mechanical equipment. And then I'd just like to talk a little bit about implementation. A lot of people say, when is this going to get built? And one of the things I want to reiterate from the market study is, you know, we're used to just looking at single sites going up very quickly. This is almost 2 million square foot project with a variety of uses in it, new infrastructure that needs to go in. So this is a project that's going to evolve over time. And you may see bits and pieces of it going up, but it will come together over time. There is some opportunity the city has, though, to begin to jumpstart portions of it through a public-private partnership. And really what's most important in this diagram is sort of that lower to you left-hand corner, where we really need to make sure that whatever the city does makes sense for the city, and that they don't do something that's not economically viable for them and that doesn't have long-term revenues. What would happen is that you might take parts of the city center and do a more detailed site plan, maybe update the market study a little bit. It's almost 18 months old now, and really look at what you could build, how many parking spaces would be needed, how many square feet would be available, what you could lease it for, what the revenues would be, and then begin to solicit some private partners and begin to look at what the city would get out of it as well as what the private partners could get out of it as well. And there's an actual process you go through to do that. The city could issue an RFP on their site. And then what I think is most interesting about this slide is the beige or the gold lower right-hand corner, where it lists all of the ways to look at not only short-term revenues. In this case, we can't sell the site. This is from another project that we did. But all of the other kinds of revenues that could accrue to the city from a public-private partnership, getting someone in there to build some of the areas and maybe leasing it back, or other programs that could come together. And then ultimately doing a cash flow, running the numbers, and really making sure that the city looks at this project as like a developer, so that you really have two developers discussing almost how to do a joint venture and making sure those numbers work and looking at those revenues and seeing how those revenues work. And again, this is from another project, so we had to cross out the names. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Leslie from Commission? Okay. What I envision is to have anyone that would like to make comments, ask questions, and then provide the Commission an opportunity to kind of wrap up. And we're going to be here on August the 2nd to hear any other comments, questions, and then to take action on the draft plan. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to us on the city center plan? Mr. Tupper.
Todd Tupper, 8601 North Scottsdale Road, Scottsdale, representing Sun MP. I'm going to limit my comments to really two areas. One, I think, is that we'd all like to see, I think, we have submitted a number of comments, and staff and Leslie and her staff have been very gracious to meet with us and answer all of our questions. And I think all are anxious to see this final document come. So when that comes, we'll probably still have a few more comments with staff to try to fine tune it a little bit more. But I guess our area of concern is still in the amendment process, and I think if Leslie is going to include her comment, that'll probably lessen our concern a little bit. But what we've been stressing all along is this isn't a document necessarily where the city is regulating typically the role of us as the developer landowner. You're also in the mix. So when you look at this document, you also have to look at yourself and what this document does to the property you own too. So I think that we just want to have the amendment process be somewhat flexible so that we don't miss opportunities that may present themselves for both us and you as well. I guess the other area of concern, and I don't know, maybe I've been asleep for the last couple of years, but I'd like to have someone explain a little bit, if I understand it correctly, is that there's a memorandum of understanding that eliminates the wood parcel from the city center?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, there's a memorandum of understanding regarding the stadium issue, and if the stadium is constructed, then the property would be exempt from the city center specific area plan.
So, I mean, we've been going along with the assumption that the 20 acres of the wood parcel has always been a part of the city center. And so
it is.
If the stadium goes forward and their parcel is exempt, I think that has a lot of implications on the overall concept of the city center and especially the Southeast District. So I'd like to have at least maybe an opportunity to have a little bit more discussion with someone about this issue.
Mr. Chairman, the Sun MP property only encompasses 20 acres. That's all. Just in the, I'm sorry, wood property, only 20 acres. So we're not talking about that that much property first. And they have a PAD that's being processed in the which has a different vision than the stadium and a different vision than the city center. Which that's what we're processing, and that's what we're moving forward. There's no certainty to the stadium. We're just saying there's an opportunity for a stadium. It may change things in that area, so we want to have that flexibility. You know, on the one hand, Mr. Tupper said we wanted flexibility for amendments. We're trying to provide flexibility for an opportunity that the city's, you know, in partnership with Wood on providing a stadium, which we think is a good opportunity for the whole community. So this is our ability to do that is to provide this exemption just if there's a stadium. So I don't know if that explains it, but that's kind of where we're, from a policy standpoint, that's where we're going.
And I appreciate the comment. We're not here to try to eliminate the stadium. Please don't get me wrong, but I think it does have some implications as to whatever the land use is for that 20 acres abuts our remaining property in that district. And if their land uses somehow impact my land uses, and we have to go through a process of amending the plan, what is that process? I'm just, as I said, this is new to me, so I wasn't aware of it until Leslie just said something. So I don't think this is the first time that we've ever heard about it.
The plan considers two processes. There's a minor amendment and a major amendment, depending on what and the plan details what a major amendment is and a minor amendment. And Mr. Tupper, talked about the flexibility, which is a good point, and I struggle with that too. On the one hand, we want to have a plan that's going to be adaptable to the future because there are maybe opportunities, and we may want to change the plan. But on the same hand, we don't want the change to be so easily changed during the time frame that the intent and the spirit of the plan is changed. So it's a balancing act. So we can go back and revisit that amendment process to make it maybe more compatible.
And I think we're in agreement that it is a balancing act. I guess where I'm coming from right now is that balancing act has now been thrown off right out of the chute, which is if the stadium comes forward, there's 20 acres out of the city center master plan, of which I have no idea what the final land uses are going to be, and that as an adjoining property owner impacts me. So I appreciate the argument. I think we're in favor of, I think, some of the language that Leslie proposed, but the balance has now been thrown out of whack.
Well,
so we don't need to discuss it here. I'm just saying it's an issue. It's new. I don't know what the impact is going to be, and I think we just have to have more discussion about it.
Well, just one final comment. There is, Mr. Chair, there is a concept plan for the stadium. So the stadium, and then we'll have residential and retail around the stadium. So there is a concept plan on that 20 acres. If Mr. Tepper wants to see it, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if it's.
We've never seen it, never been aware of it, haven't been informed about the MOU, so this is all news to me.
It was in a public meeting, and it was approved in a public meeting in this room.
Missed that meeting.
I was there.
I was there.
Missed that one, I guess. Okay.
You weren't here, but it was approved.
Okay. Duly noted.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the city center draft plan? Yes, sir.
Ilios Cari again, and this time I'm representing Becca USA. Everything that's been said so far is for the outdoors part of the city center. I would like to suggest something for the indoor parts of whatever will be the territory of the city of Goodyear. So what I am suggesting, and especially in the comment that Mr. Gary Gelser gave earlier about the roads being decided 40 years ago, and we are living with shortcomings now, and 10 years down the road we are going to be still behind schedule. These decisions sometimes take a long time. And I would like to bring to your consideration for the indoor, especially for the city, although I don't think you can regulate the other private part of the city center, but is to consider, at least, to be knowledgeable of the availability of a completely different air-conditioned system. I would like to bring the attention now, for example, the system that you are enjoying, in quotation right now, is about 100 years old technology brought to solve some paper printing problems, not the human biology, and we are living with that. And the system is doing the job, but with some shortcomings, like a noise, like a draft, and I had to raise my voice, or I had to make an effort to listening when the system starts, the air handler or the other units. You get turbulence, you get draft, you get very inconvenience. All those systems can be replaced with a 21st century air conditioning system called radiant cooling and heating, and a system that uses water instead of air to cool, and is made and developed for human comfort, not to solve the problem of paper, printing paper. As I understand that this is maybe too early, but if you guys are aware of that, you can consider that and put it in due time into consideration. As I say, if you make the decision now, it will last 40, 50 years. The system that we install, or we recommend, or we suggest, is about 75 years. So you put it today, and 75 years down the road should be still working like at the first day. Anyway, there is a lot of things to be known, and I would like you to consider the opportunity to learn more about it, and you can always, and you will, give the thumbs down or the thumbs up to that thing if it's worthwhile. In the meantime, besides solving all the problems, you will have a tremendous personnel employee acceptance. You will have no possibility of sick building syndrome. You will save energy. You will get in 150 feet that you got a limit. You will get an extra floor for every 4 floors due to space savings, and that will give you much more rentable space, and that will pay for the system, so you practically can get it for free. You also will have less electricity, less consumption, and you will have less maintenance. These systems, as soon as you install, start deteriorating, and as you go, becomes a budget. So in the long run, when you put everything on the table, and I can make you much more aware of that, you will see that it's a win-win-win-win situation, no counting the prestige that will bring to the Goodyear city to be in the 21st century in this way to cool and so on. Again, as I say, this is for the indoors, and maybe it's later on down the road, but I would like to take this opportunity and having such a small hole here to bring it to you and present it that way. So thank you very much. And If you need me for anything, let me know. I can expand much more.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the city center draft plan? Okay. I know that staff has received written comments from several interested individuals and organizations, and my question, Leslie, is that part of our packet tonight was the questions and responses from several parties, including some questions and issues that were discussed at the TAC meeting. Is it your intent to consolidate those discussions and indicated corrections and so forth to go into the draft that we will see for the second, or is this a document where you're going to continue to accumulate issue discussions, and once we've taken our action to incorporate those for the legislative package for the City Council?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, the latter.
The latter. Okay. So we're going to continue to delineate issues, and we should have some additional discussion of that type for our meeting on the 2nd.
Yeah, we'll, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, we'll go through we've received all the comments from SunNP. We just got the Snell and Wilmer comments today. So we'll go through those and meet with the representatives from Woods, and then I guess we'll append those. Harvey, do you want to just append that to the matrix?
Yes.
We'll append those comments to this matrix.
Thank you. Last call. Okay. I'd like to give an opportunity for each of the commissioners to make any comments, ask any questions before we close the public hearing for this evening. Ms. Loretano.
I'll just say you've done a great job. I was a part of the committee, and I just thought it was a delight working with you and your group, and it's turned out wonderful, and I'd like to see something built soon.
Mr. Bay.
I'd like to echo those comments, Leslie. Your firm did a wonderful job. It's hard to believe when you showed the numbers that we actually started in 2004. So I'm looking forward to this process ending and watching things go up. So
Mr. DeBroker.
I'm glad to see a hotel.
More than
Good job.
Mr. Gelser.
I have a couple of comments. I attended most of the TAC meetings and the public meetings, and I was one of the early proponents of height and asking people to think tall. And I'm very glad to see that the core of the city center is going to be at least regulated to be at least, or can be, as high as 150 feet, and the other areas to be 78 feet. That's real positive. Overall, I think it's a very good plan. I'm looking forward to it. I think it takes a lot of things into account. The gentleman who spoke earlier, one of the things you brought up a very interesting point, and I'm not sure if we addressed this in the city center plan, but we talk about the use of effluent. I'm not sure that we talk about the use of solar power or other more environmentally friendly energy sources and building design. And I think that should be incorporated somewhere in the policy statement, so that if somebody actually proposes putting solar panels on the roof of their building, we ought to be able to allow it without having a major flap as it goes through the design process. But overall, I'm very happy. Thank you.
Mr. Lux.
You know, I can echo everyone's comments. This is a very exciting prospective development for the city. It's very forward-thinking. It's something new and unique for the city, and I'm just glad to have been part of it.
having attended as with my wife and Mr. Gelser the majority of the activities, including from the opening bell through the charrette and so forth, it's not often that a community gets the opportunity to take a blank canvas and do something of this sort. And I think the goals and the spirit of the residents of the city are reflected in the plan. I know that this is going to be a living document, and that there are going to be some things that we're going to change. Some may come sooner than we think, and others will be down the road as this thing morphs into something that may be a little different than we envision, but hopefully maintains the same spirit. I'd also like to commend the citizens of the city for an incredibly active participation through the surveys and the charrette. Without them, this plan is not, wouldn't be viable, because at some point in time there are going to be financial commitments required, and if we didn't have the buy-in of the citizens and this plan didn't reflect their image of what the city's going to be, the success of those efforts would be in question. The public-private partnership is a very viable way to implement the civic portion of this project, and I know you're familiar with several projects, and I went through the skepticism with the Fairfax County Government Center, and it's still referred to as the Taj Mahal, and I'm not sure that we want that image, but we do want the quality, and I think the plan affords us the opportunity to do that, and I look forward to getting this moving at our next meeting, and I know the City Council is chomping at the bit, because in their budget discussions they became critically aware of critical mass of size of staff and need to rent new space, and rent is something that doesn't have a return to it other than providing space for staff, whereas buildings that we own have an opportunity for some cost savings in the long run for the city. So with that, I will stop talking and ask for any final comments. If there are none, I'll close the public hearing. And thank everybody for being here and their participation. And the next item on our agenda, thank you very much, Leslie. The next item on our agenda is staff communication.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything to report unless you have any questions. Just a reminder, the August 2nd special meeting here, 7 o'clock. And then our regular meeting is August 16th, August 16th. And we may not have a quorum, so we'll have to reevaluate that meeting.
There are a couple of us,
Several of you.
Gary and I think Sean, know that we will not be here. Is there anyone else that has a question mark?
Of what, the 16th?
Yeah.
16th. I won't be here for the 2nd, but I'll be here for the 16th.
For the 16th. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I think Joanne will be here for the 16th, so I think we'll be okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Harvey, if the 16th meeting is postponed, would it move to the alternate scheduled meeting in September, that first Wednesday in September, or you're not sure?
It looks like we might have a quorum for the August
Okay.
16th meeting, so we may need to have another meeting in September based upon, we have several major general plan amendments we're processing right now, and that will necessitate 2 planning commission meetings on those general plan amendments, and those are at different locations. Remember, last year we moved down to Star Point Resort down in the Stray Mountain Ranch. we'll be needing to move to another location to have a public hearing on the general plan amendments. So we will keep you advised as to when those will be.
Okay. Is there any other business before the commission?
Adjourn.
If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. We're adjourned.